All right, welcome back. And it's COMP305, Game Programming 1, and it's week, I said lesson 3, this is wrong. It's actually week 4, lesson 4, lesson 4, part 1, but only for section 1. So I'm going to update this after this video is done, to talk about what it's going to be called. Anyways, what I wanted to say with this video is a couple things. One is that the broadcast stuff that we're supposed to do isn't quite working out the way I'd like it to. Some people are not happy with it. And remember what I said, if there's enough people that aren't happy with me broadcasting, then I'll just come in, right? Because that's just the way it goes. So I'm going to continue doing the broadcast during these classes just in case you want to stay home and work from there. But I won't, if I actually record the video from now on during the day, then I'm not going to re-record again. This is kind of the only time I'm going to do this, just so that way for people there tonight, for whatever reason, they're home tonight, then they can hear me what I'm saying, and they'll get kind of the same experience as the people in the day. But I won't record every time because it doesn't make any sense for me to record it twice. It's the same material. But otherwise, what we're going to be talking about today is how to fix what we were working on something last week. And remember, this class, section 1, has a slightly different, some stuff that's slightly different on GitHub. So if you go to github.com, and if you look at Centennial College, then you can see that there is a COMP305 mail pilot demo. That's for section 2, and there's one for section 1. That's the one we worked on last day, right? Section 1. So there's some few issues here that I'm going to fix that I kind of fixed in the next section. Right, so remember, that's one advantage you guys have. I fix a problem in one section, and then I do it properly in this one, right? Or vice versa. It's the other way around sometimes, right? So what I'm going to do is, but this is the file that I'm going to be using. So before I start, there's a couple of administration issues that I got to talk about. Administrative issues. One is that I'm probably going to give you assignment number 2 next day, tomorrow, for you guys, right? And for that, and like I gave you guys your tutorial, so if I go to Unity 3D Learn, your tutorial last time, what you're supposed to have completed is the space shooter tutorial. And I know from some of you haven't still done that. Have you guys done it yet? Yeah, I know, you're shaking your head. You got to do it, right? Because if you don't do the stuff, I'm going to ask you on a test to build something, and you're not going to be able to build it fast enough. There's just no way. You're not good enough unless you actually physically do something, right? So this is the first tutorial I gave you guys, but I'm going to give you another one now, which is under mini projects. It's creating a basic platformer game, okay? Because the next assignment you're going to get, assignment 2, is all going to be creating a platformer, right? So platformers, we have like a Mario Brothers or one of those kind of things where you run from one platform to the other, and we use 2D physics in order for you to jump and to do different things, right? So what I've asked you to do is to do this tutorial. It's not that long. And then after you're doing this, I'm going to use this one to base the next assignment on. So assignment number 2 is going to be using this tutorial primarily, along with another one, okay? So you need to do these. When I give you a tutorial, it's like, here's reading. Think about this as like you have to read chapters 1 and 2. Well, this is your reading. I'm going to cover it in class. We'll do a tutorial example in class. Next week, we'll start off with this platformer, right? But I still need you to do the tutorial so that way you guys are on the same level with me. So when we're talking, you know what I'm talking about. Now, again, I know students don't like to read in general. Like reading is just not happening these days. When you get a book, you download it, right? But when it comes to tutorial, you got to do it. This is something that, you have to follow the video tutorial. You got to step it through, even if it's a little painful, and get it done. Some of these are pretty long, right? So some of you are going to say, well, it's really long. So I have a solution for you. You can always download it and play it faster. So how do I download it? Well, I go to, if I go to download video from YouTube, if I put that into Google, right? There are some apps you can download and install on your machine, on your local environment, or you can use this online app called savefrom.net. This is the location. You just put the link of your YouTube video here, and you can download it, right? So now there's other services like this as well. So why would you download it anyway, right? Because this is the YouTube video from here. Well, I'm going to show you. I just downloaded this one, and it's this one right here. So here's creating a basic 2D platformer game. Here's the video. I'm going to launch it with VLC Media Player, right? So that's what I'm going to do. And if you notice here, this is normal speed. This is what the video looks like. This is what you're going to be building in the next tutorial, right? So instead of following just this video at a normal speed, what you can do is you can go to playback, and what you can do is increase the playback speed to like twice as fast. Now, why would you want to do that? Because sometimes what you want to do is you want to get right to the good stuff, right? So you can do that with VLC, a lot more control than you do on YouTube. And if, for example, if I want to zoom into the code, I can zoom into the code and kind of take a look at the code and get to that place where you're actually typing the code, which is what I want you guys to learn. Okay, so some stuff to do here. I think there's some really good things, we can look at. This video is for Unity 4.3, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to modify this for Unity 5, right? So we'll do both Unity 4 and 5 with this set of videos. But if you follow these videos with a bit of modification, they'll work nicely for Unity 4 and 5. So that's the video I want you guys to do, and I've given you guys a tool way of downloading it and installing or watching the video off of YouTube, because this video is actually on YouTube, where you can actually follow along and start doing this platformer. So that's one piece of administration. The other one is that some of you have come to me with an issue, like the people in section 2. They've come to me with an issue that you guys are too busy, right? So normally your assignment number 1 is due this Friday at midnight. So how you guys doing with your assignment 1? First assignment. You're almost done? And how about everyone else? You guys almost done assignment number 1? Yes? No? No? Well, anyways, I'm giving you an extension till Monday. Okay, so for those people who are not done, it's due Monday at midnight. Remember, every day late is 20% lower, right? So please don't be late after Monday. I'm giving you an extension because a lot of the people said, you know what, we've got lots of stuff due this Friday, all at the same time. Plus, this weekend is the Varsity Hack for those people who are going to go, which I highly recommend you do. If you're involved as a gamer, you should join this Varsity Hack. So let's take a look at that. You can get there to get the details. You can get the details at varsityhack.ca. And you can certainly subscribe as a developer or a designer or a business person or a pitcher. And they have a full schedule of events, what's going to happen there at Varsity Hack. It's happening here at the school, like I said earlier, for those people who saw it before. So totally worth going if you're interested in being a software developer of any kind. They're going to do all kinds of different things. They'll build apps. They'll build little desktop apps, mobile apps, game apps, all kinds of things that they'll put together. And they're going to select groups of people. So far, there's about, from what I'm hearing from Professor Ilya, there's about 60 people that have already registered. So it's going to be a pretty cool event. Also, from what I'm hearing, U of T Scarborough campus is also going to attend. So there's not just us at Centennial, but also some visitors. So I think it's a great opportunity for you guys to practice your skills and work with the team. So because of this, and because of the fact that everyone's really, really busy, I've kind of moved everything off till Monday. So Monday at midnight is a new due date. So it gives you another extra night to kind of finish things off. But then anything after Monday, so if it was Tuesday or whatever, it'd be 20% per day, right? So just from a lateness perspective. So again, super important to follow the videos. And again, the first set of, if I was going to go to learn, the first set of tutorials, like I said last time, is this space shooter tutorial. I also talked to you about doing the rollerball. So rollerball and space shooter right on the Unity site. If you notice here, there's 18 parts to this video. So if actually it was click on there, the space shooter tutorial isn't just one part. There's a bunch of little parts to it. Now they're not all. It's not like 18 hours of work here, okay? But there's definitely, if you go through it the whole way, I mean, each of these videos can be quite lengthy, especially if you don't understand. You have to go back and try it again. Again, I recommend you download all the videos and watch them kind of in order, in a sequence, as opposed to, watching them just here. Right now, the great thing about these videos is if I go to the first one, like if I go to the first one, which is setting up the project, I could choose to watch the video, but on the bottom, they also have related tutorials, like things like the project panel and importing, and build and player settings, and so on. All kinds of other additional topics that you should kind of look into. And if you have enough time, the player game object, as an example. Here's another one. On the bottom, again, it gives you things about colliders as triggers, rigid bodies. There's all these extra tutorials here that you can totally go through, and both from a documentation perspective as well as from a tutorial perspective to go through it. So I mean, this is our book. Our book is mostly online here, right? So again, I'm not asking you to read necessarily, but we need to do a little bit of work outside of the class, and it comes in the form of tutorials. Okay, that's enough about that. Does anyone have a problem with Monday's due date? Because that's what kind of we decided in the earlier class, yeah?
Let's say we do hand in our assignment today. What kind of turnaround can we expect some feedback from you?
Well, again, the faster I get it from you, let's say if it wasn't today, if it was, let's say, Friday, because I'll wait till everyone's done, right? I try and mark them all together at the same time. What I try and do is give you like a 2-week turnaround the most. So that's what my goal is, because I have to mark your stuff and other courses as well, right? So that's my my turnaround time, because I want you guys to know how you're doing. But chances are, if I see your assignment, or if what I've done today in the first section that I was with, section 2, I kind of went around and looked at people that were ready, right? So I could see what they're doing, give them some feedback. One of the things I had asked, I'm going to go to concept board here for a second. And again, for those of you who hadn't joined me before, I use concept board as well to log in here. I have a board. I'll go to my board here. I'm going to erase this board here. This is the one I used from this morning, so I'm kind of deleting it and make a new board. And again, from a board perspective, I'm just going to pull up this create. You guys can join me here. Here's my sticky note. And this is COMP305, section 1. Okay. And this concept board that I'm using is a way of us communicating together, right? And you can do it anonymously. This is a good thing, right? So you don't have to worry about, if you're nervous about talking or whatever, you can certainly just use concept board. So in order for you to find this link, I'm going to share the link on this COMP305. Save. I'm going to save the link, share the link on Twitter, right? Now, in order for you to find me on Twitter, you have to subscribe, because I'm a private guy. Right? So join me on concept board. I'm going to tweet that. And if you join me on my Twitter account, which is, I kind of mentioned this last time, if you go to Twitter, and if you look at, the only way you can join me is at and my last name, right? Then you can see that I'm you can join me on concept board this way. Okay, so here's the question I'm going to ask for you guys if you join me on concept board now, if you want to. The guys that are here in the class, and some people have joined me. What did you find? What are you finding hard about assignment number 1? What's really becoming, what's difficult? So put it up on concept board so you don't have to, again, you don't have to put up your hand, just put up on concept board so everyone can see it, right? And then what are you finding hard about assignment 1? What's the biggest block? There's some interesting comments that came back to me from section 2 earlier today. But I wanted to see from you guys, because you guys are a whole different section, what are you guys having issues with, difficulties? Yeah, I got this is what happens, right? People join me on Twitter for the first time, and then I get a bunch of requests. This is good. So I will accept you. There we go. So join me on Twitter, and then on concept board here, or you can look at the link if you don't want to do that. You can see if you can see the link up here. It's unfortunately not a really friendly link. Well, you can certainly come and look at it. It's right here. And I'm going to bring this a little closer. So I'm going to give you a second to think about it. But what I'm asking is just some feedback for, let's bring this over here for you guys. So what are you finding challenging about assignment 1? And I'll share with you the stuff that I heard from the first section, or section 2 actually, because they gave you some interesting feedback this morning. Some people gave me feedback like, I'm finding nothing difficult with assignment 1. Everything is easy, right? That's when I got one of those, right? But that was like one person out of a bunch of other people. So go ahead, don't be afraid, please. This is why this is open. So for people in the room, please join me on concept board here. So far, I've got like 1 joiner. That's it. So here's one. Logistics of finding all the knowledge you need to complete, i.e. if you need to learn about colliders. I have to really review the videos on that, even though I've done the tutorial. Okay. So I know there's a lot of stuff to do. This is the thing with game development. I think this is a great point, whoever put this up. And I think the reason why it's such a good point is because from what this says, really, at the end of the day, when we look at this thing, you know, we have so many piece parts, so many pieces, as an example, to building a game. Part of it is planning. Part of it is putting together some kind of plan, right, for how my game is going to look. I haven't asked you guys to put together a major plan, just a very simple plan, right? And knowing where to start. How do I start? That's one of the biggest things too. Like, where do I go from here? But most of the knowledge, most of the stuff you need about colliders and so on, they're online, where I showed you, and I'm going to cover that today. Right? So we're going to talk about colliders today. How do I do a collider? You know, what's the difference between a 2D collider and a 3D collider? We're going to learn that over the course of the semester, right? But today we're going to set up a collider. We'll do a little bit of audio, right? So you can hear the collisions happening, right? And different kinds of colliders. And then what we're going to go into is, so it's going to, I guess, it's going to cover this question a lot, actually. So that's a good question. Anyone else? Not much really that I'm seeing other than that one thing. Why don't I do this? I'll let you guys put up your thoughts. That's what I'm really looking for here. Your thoughts about, you know, what you find difficult. I'll put that in there. So, what do you find challenging for assignment 1? That's really the question. Part of it's time, and that was one of the things that came out. That's why I gave everyone extensions too. So I'm just going to put it out there so you guys can do your thing. I'll let you guys join or whatever. And then I'll go back to some of the things we were covering last day we were together. So let's get to that. So I'm going to bring up my Unity here, and I'm going to ask you to do the same. And if you can hear from my voice, I'm a little bit under the weather today. So please bear with me as I start, you know, this off today. It's going to be a bit of a scratchy voice. So here we are. We're going to bring up COMP305 Mail Pilot Demo Section 1. So you guys are slightly different. We're in a different stopping place than the other section. But we're going to fix that. One of the problems we had from last day was, how do I make the boundaries work? I think that was one of the things that people asked about. How do I make the boundaries work? So I have a couple of examples online about how to do that. So first of all, let's take a look at player. And I want to go into the scripts for the player. So here's my player controller. And one thing I was doing here is I was saying, okay, let's detect the boundary. So here's my boundary. And down here I'm saying, well, here's my input axis horizontal, right? So if I move left, as an example, if it's greater than 0, if I'm moving to the right, then add my move to my position, right? If I'm moving to the left, then subtract my move. That's what this does. And here is where we went wrong. So it's this new position. I'm checking to see if this new position, right, is less than, let's just check this alone, is less than the boundary x min, right, which is the minimum position for the boundary. And it's not less than or equal to, it's less than, right? So if it's less than, then I want to make it equal to. That's what I'm doing. I'm saying, so make it the minimum boundary, right? And it's the same thing for if it's greater than. If it's greater than the maximum boundary, not this 33F, just greater than the maximum boundary here, then what I want to do is make it equal to the maximum boundary. So I'm saying it'll stop the plane, our player's position, from hitting the right boundary. So let's take a look at that and see what the effect of that is. So I'm going to just play. And if everything goes well, and if I've coded this correctly, you see now that my player's plane just stops right at the corner, right? So it doesn't move, doesn't bounce like it used to, right? So there it is, just staying at the corner there, see? Also, from a player controller perspective, let me take a look at my player controller, right? You can see that the boundaries are a little bit different than what I did in with the section 2 class, slightly different. And my move is 5, which is fine. I did slightly different things in that class, but overall, we have now a basic game for us that works almost exactly like theirs. Right? There's those slight differences in code, but that's because, you know, I'm a human being and I'm gonna do slightly different, right? Sometimes I have my fevered brain thinks different things. When I'm with you guys, you know, I think slightly different things than I do during the day. Okay, but now what we want to talk about is we've got this nice movement, but I want to add some colliders. Let me go back to concept board for a second to see if anyone else added anything else. Guys, come on. I need you guys to tell me some. I know you guys are laughing. I need to hear from you guys. What's the difficulty? If you tell me what you want to learn, I'm going to focus what you tell me on the stuff that I can teach you. Otherwise, you know what? I'm just going to teach you according to the other class. The other class gave me way more feedback than you guys. I know there's less of you, and some of you are remote right now. Some of you haven't even started this video because you're thinking I'm going to start at 7. Yeah. It won't open for you because you're using Unity 4. You have to use Unity 5. And in that case, you need to convert from the mail pilot demo that I'm giving you, use the scripts, but rebuild it from scratch. That's the way to do it. If you're using Unity 4, there's a bit of extra work for you because the computers in front of us here at the school, they're all Unity 4, and we're using Unity 5 here, right? Now, the difference is very minimal, but you have to rebuild. You have to work with me to build your own little repository from GitHub, right? So when as we're working, you can put things up. That's a good point, though. How do you do that? So what I would do is I would go to GitHub, and I would download everything. Like I would download this project, but then when I rebuild this project, I would kind of drag and drop all my assets, my audio, my fonts, my prefabs, my sprites, my scenes, everything. I'm drag and drop that over, and then rebuild everything from there. Scripts are the things that are going to mess you up a little bit, and also your scene. You may have to delete your scene, which is this main scene, and create a new scene, right? But otherwise, everything should work almost identically from Unity 5 to Unity 4. The only thing is slight script differences. You're going to see a discrepancy. Okay, so I'll put it out there if you guys want to join me. Here I am on GitHub, and you can see me, the link here at Twitter, on my Twitter account. Okay, let's go back. So I'm going to update this on GitHub because we're a little bit behind. I modified a couple things. So just to keep on the same track, if you guys don't have the same thing as I do, I'm going to go to Desktop and Unity, and I'm also going to go to COMP305, Mail Pilot Demo - Section 1. Here it is. I'm going to do a git add dot. Yeah. Git add dot, and then git commit -m updated player boundary checking. And then what I'm just going to say git push origin master, which should push me up to GitHub. So everything that I have now, you have on the repository online. Okay. So worst case scenario, you can always, if you can't follow along quick enough, you can always download my repository, modify for Unity 4.3. But I highly recommend, if you're in this class, if you have access to a laptop, you bring your laptop, you'll have more control, and you can install Unity 5. It is a personal edition for yourself. so you can keep on track with me. Okay? If you don't have access, then you can certainly do it, but it takes a little bit more work. Okay, so we've got to this point. I want to add a collider, right? So how do I do this? Let's do the first one. I want to add a collider for my, well, this time we did it a little bit differently during the day. I will add it for my cloud. Okay, let's take a look here. So if I look at my prefabs, my cloud is part of my prefabs, right? Remember what prefabs are. What are prefabs? You guys know what prefabs are? How about you guys? Do you know what prefabs are? What's a prefab?
I'm not sure how to explain, but you've already done, you've given all the properties and you've stored it. So you can
It's like
use it how many times.
It's like a prototype or a class. If you were to consider this as your, if you were going to instantiate this object, I have an object that's already been prototyped, right? It's this cloud object I've talked about, right? And what I want to do is I want to modify my prefab. But if I add a collider, there's different ways for me to have collisions. I need to add a couple of components to detect collisions. One component is a rigid body 2D. But the thing is, for me to modify the shape of my collider or even to see it, I got to really drag and drop my prefab onto my hierarchy temporarily, like this. So I'm going to grab my cloud, bring it onto my hierarchy. Now it appears, when I kind of zoom in there, and I'm going to really zoom in. So that's my cloud, right? Now remember, my cloud is a prefab. So any changes I make to this cloud, the one I made instantiated here in the hierarchy, I've got to apply. I've got to click the apply button so it goes back and applies to my prefab, right? Otherwise, it'll only be for this cloud, not for all the clouds. Okay, so here's my cloud. I want to add a couple of components. Like I said, so far I have a cloud controller, which is a script. I have a sprite renderer, which is for my cloud, and I have a transform. I need to add a component here, and it has to be a physics 2D, rigid body 2D component. So add that for me. And if you notice here, you get some interesting characteristics, properties, mass, right, and linear drag and angular drag and blah, blah. I don't need any of this stuff because you know what? We're not going to do 2D physics on this object. So turn it all off. So just put 0 for this one. And we're going to put 0 for angular drag. And you know what? We're going to put 0 for gravity scale. But if you notice, even though we tried to assign a mass of 0, it wouldn't allow us. It gave us a default mass of 0.0001, right? That's okay. That's the first component, a rigid body 2D. This is the steps you have to take. Step 2, I need to add a collider, okay? So let's add this in. Now there's different kinds of colliders. Take a look. I can add in a circle collider. I can add in a box collider. I can add in an edge collider. I can also add in a Polygon Collider. Okay, here's the problem. The Polygon Collider is the most costly collider, right? Costly collider. Why? Because it's multiple shape. Let me show you what a box collider looks like, which is the most common collider. Watch. So I add it in. And if I go edit, look what it shows me here. Here, if you can see it online, I've got these little control handles that have come up. I'm just going to zoom in so you can see these little control handles, right? And I can see the shape of my collider here, right? So what I can do is I can take these control handles and modify my collider so that way it can be more or less. But here's the problem. Would this collider be a great shape for this object? Why would it not be a good shape? Anybody? What do you think is not a good shape? Sorry, what's your name? Okay, I'll try and pronounce it. I'll try and pronounce it again a little later. So yeah, so this is a square shape, but look at all this space here. You get all this empty space over here, and there's empty space over here, 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 and here. That's a problem, right? So if you don't know anything about 2D collisions, if you've never done that before, let me explain to you. Let's go back to concept board for a second. So I'm going to push this aside for a second so I can show you. All right, I'm going to insert some objects here so you can see what I'm talking about. You can see these right on concept board in front of you if you were to log in with me. I'm going to go to desktop. I'm going to go to the Unity projects that I'm working on. I'll go to your project, which is section 1, and I'll go into the assets, right, into my sprites, and I have these sprites right now. I'm going to drag and drop on my cloud. Here's my cloud, right? and I'm going to drag and drop my plane. Here's my plane. Okay, cool. Got my cloud and my plane. And let's take a look at this now for a second. If I zoom in here, I'm going to zoom in. So if I click on the cloud, right? So I click on the cloud, you can see that the boundary. This is about like a rectangular collider, and this is the rectangular collider of the plane. So here's my question to you: is this right here, right here? Is that a collision between the plane? A visual collision between the plane? Right? I'm just going to go back to review for a second. Is there a visual collision between the plane and the cloud? Is it visually colliding? Visually means when you look at it, does it look like it's hitting? The answer is no. How about if I click on this thing here, if I go click on these things, is there a, from a game perspective, is there a collision? And the answer is, with a resounding yes, it is. Because if I look at both these objects, you see that they overlap. The actual bounding boxes overlap between the two collisions, right? So even though you don't have a visual collision, you have a physical collision inside the game, right? This is bad, because if I played a game like this, right, and I had a collision here when I didn't hit the actual cloud, I'd be like, wow, this game sucks, right? I got hit and I didn't even hit, right? What happened, right? Well, it's because the programmer used some kind of rectangular bounding box that didn't really represent the shape of the sprite that it was around, right? So this makes no sense. So these rectangular colliders are really good for simple objects, rectangular objects, to fill up most of the space, right? There's other objects too that you can use. Instead of a rectangular collider, you could use, just going to go back to this, let's look at some other objects, right? So I'm going to create, let's use some other objects like an ellipse. I could use an ellipse, right? I can kind of draw a circle, right? And more or less it's got to be circular, so let's just make it circular. Oops, there we go. That's really what it would be like, right? A circle. And the circle itself could be could also be a collider, right? There you go. There's a circle, and I can make a circle collider or an ellipse around my plane as well, right? And now you can see that there wouldn't be a collision, not visual, and not from a computer perspective. It wouldn't detect a collision, right? But look at all this empty space over here. Still. It's still not representational, not really a lot, right? Now, a circle collider is a little heavier than a rectangular collider, right? A box collider. And an edge collider is even heavier than a circle collider. The heaviest from a 2D perspective, when I say heavy, I mean heavy CPU utilization perspective. It's heavy on the CPU. It takes a lot more cycles for the game to calculate some kind of Polygon Collider. From a 3D perspective, the worst is a mesh collider, which is like it actually just surrounds the entire mesh. That's bad, right? So we can modify these colliders a little bit, but this is still not the greatest solution. It's better, right, because they're a little bit spherical, right? But imagine if my plane was here, I wouldn't see, it'd be the same problem. In this little nook here in the cloud, it would appear that there's no collision, but actually there would be. Like example would be like this. So here's my plane. Oops. Here's my plane, and I'm gonna just move this. Oops. Let's see if I can do that again. I can move it around. So let's say my plane be here. It doesn't look like it's colliding, right? Because the circle collider is not really. But from a circle collider, these two circles are intersecting, and therefore there's a collision, right? So the game detects there's a collision, but you don't see a collision. Same problem here, just different place, right? So circle collider is not a great solution either. Let's go back to Unity. So what other colliders are there? Well, there's like I said, if I was going to add in another collider, this is a rigid body 2D. Let's change this one. Let's get rid of this one. So I'm going to remove this one. And let's add another collider, right? Which is an edge collider. So here's an edge collider. And right now, when you look at it, take a look. You don't see much, right? If I edit it, you see this line, right? And what I can do with the edge collider, which I did in this class earlier, is kind of you can modify the edge collider so only one edge will be the one that you see. And the thing is, what you can do with it is you can actually, by clicking in the middle of the edges here, you can actually modify this collider to kind of spin around the shape. Now there's a problem with this, which we'll look at later on. Okay, but I want to do this for the cloud. So here's my cloud. And try this out yourself. Try doing this by yourself, guys. You're asking me about colliders. This is the way to learn, right? To do. So make it like this. Put this shape here. Modify here like this. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm actually, what I'm doing is, I'm physically changing the shape of my my edge collider here, right? So that way, I'm closer to the shape of my cloud, yeah? Take a look. Now, do you guys see any potential issues with this one? Can you see an issue? What possible problems could there be about making this an edge collider? Think about the word. What was that? To do it like this?
If it's even more complex object.
Well, if it was a more complex object, we wouldn't use this. We'd probably use a, you know, like I said, you can probably use something like a Polygon Collider, and that would help. But we'll talk about what's the difference between a Polygon Collider, right? Let me just try this up for a second, and an edge collider, right? So here's an edge collider, and as you can see, I'm just drawing the edges, and I'm just pulling them out, right? So we can see what it looks like. And then what I'm doing is I'm connecting them. Now, here's a thing that you might say, well, I'm only ever gonna, my plane is down here, right? So if my plane is down here and it's coming from the below, chances are it's only gonna hit these edges right here. And maybe the sides, maybe, right? But not the top. My plane is never gonna hit the top edge, right? So I could only put the edge right down the bottom. So once it crosses this edge, I'm done. But now this is what a normal collider would look like. So let's use this, right? So that's not bad. It looks like it's not bad. Let's also make it a trigger. Let's click on is trigger, right? Actually, let me not do that for a second. I'll show you what it does. So let's leave is trigger off, and then I'm going to apply the changes. So this new collider is now the edge collider is applied to the prefab, right? Otherwise, it's only for this one instance. So let's remove this one. And now you can see that the cloud has a collider on it, okay? Let's see what that looks like. Sometimes what happens is the clouds collide into each other, right? And if I go to game and press play, you're gonna see that the clouds sometimes will, you know, collide with each other and have some really weird effects. So to avoid that, and sometimes they change position and rotation and all this kind of stuff. To avoid that, what you want to do is you want to use is trigger. You want to click this on, which makes it so that it doesn't use physics collisions, but rather becomes a trigger, so that we can detect whether one collider overlaps or intersects with another one. That's kind of easier for us to do. So we have to click is trigger. Okay, I'm going to save my scene. Let's do the next ones. I don't want to do a collider on the ocean, by the way. Why would I not want to do a collider on the ocean? Anybody? How about you guys over there? Why would I not want to do a collider on the ocean? Sorry? The other layers are, but why would I want to collide with the ocean? I never want to collide with the ocean. So because I don't want to ever collide with the ocean, I don't do a collider for the ocean. Right? The ocean is just a backdrop. It's just like background. So I never want to really collide with that one. Right? I want to collide with my island, and I want to collide with my clouds, right? But not my ocean. So I'm not going to do one for there. Let's do one for island. So we'll do the same sequence. Add a component, and sorry.
Why for the island?
Because we're going to. The whole idea for this game is the plane is going to pass over the island to collect points. That's the game. So he's going to get points from passing over the island. But if he hits a cloud, he gets blown up, right? Because the clouds are thunder clouds, right? That's the idea, right? So if I need to add in, again, under the island, I need to add two components. One is my physics 2D rigid body. So rigid body 2D. And the second component I got to add in is, I got to add component. My second component is a collider. So let's think about this now again. I added in an edge collider last time. Let's look at a Polygon Collider. I'm gonna add a Polygon Collider. And let's focus in on the island and see what it looks like. So I'm gonna go back to the scene. I'm gonna focus in on the island. Take a look what it does when I add a Polygon Collider. It actually makes it so it's much better. This is Unity by itself does this, right? Now this is a little tighter, but I still wanna edit this collider. So let's go to Edit Collider. And now again, you can do the same thing that you did with your other collider. You can actually create lines, drag them in, right? You can create new points, right, as an example, and make it so that it is a little bit tighter than what we had before. Make it more customized to your sprite. Here's my island. Now here's a challenge. The challenge is that the island, my Polygon Collider is heavier. Now luckily I only have one island. I probably don't want to do this for all the clouds, although you may see later on I may be forced to do that, just from an experience perspective. And so here's just gonna add more stuff here. So same idea, same process of me wrapping this up as close as possible, so that the collider appears to be more accurate, a little bit more accurate, especially on the bottom where the plane is going to hit. I want to make this as tight to the geometry here as I can, right? So that way I don't have too much of a distance between my plane and my my visual collision and my game collision. Okay, so I've kind of got this done. I finished editing and I press save. So now I've got a collider for my my island, and I also want to click is trigger as an option. So here's is trigger. Click that, and that way you can avoid physics collisions. Now we're just going to collide by using script. Okay, I got one more. So I did my island, I did my ocean, and let's do my player. Let's focus in on my player for a second. So what possibilities, what things do you see as a problem here from a player perspective? What's different about my player than the other objects? The other objects is an island, it's kind of flat, and I've got a cloud, that's kind of flat. What's wrong with my player for me doing a collider for my player? Anybody? Come on, guys, I need some feedback here. What's wrong with my player here? Why would I have a problem with my player's collider if I use an automatic collider like Unity to detect it? Remember, the player sprite. This is the whole sprite right here. Okay. Anybody? What's different than my player my player sprite than every other sprite that I have?
Using 4 images to make it look like moving object.
Well, I could. That's just my animation. But then the collider would say the same. What else?
You're using that flat plane.
I'm still using a flat plane, but that's all of them are using a flat plane. But what's different about this sprite than the other sprites? They're all sprites. The shadow. The shadow is a visual representation of something. If I try and use automatic collider detection with Unity, it'll actually use the shadow as a boundary. That makes no sense. So I have to modify this one. Okay. Let's also add in a collider here. So we're going to add component. We're going to go to physics 2D. I'm going to add a rigid body 2D. Remember what I did last time, and I forgot to do that with my island, is I have to zero all this out as much as possible because otherwise there's physics involved. I don't want physics to be happening on my objects here. I want to also add a component, physics 2D, and I want to add in a Polygon Collider this time. Let's check this out. And now look at the shape of my collider. It takes into effect my shadow here, right? I can't do that, so I have to modify my collider, like I said I was going to do, right? Let's do that. So I'm going to edit collider, and I'm going to go into my plane and try and make it as close to the plane as possible around everything so it looks more realistic. So there's my plane. So try and do this with me, guys. This is good practice for you when you make your colliders work. Don't just watch me, do. This is the way we do here in class, right? And even online if you're watching, right? So I would go in here and modify these points for my plane and make it as close to what you see visually as possible, so that way we don't get into trouble when it comes to our collision points, right? Because that's one thing we do not want. Again, you can add additional points of interest here by going in the middle of these points here, and you see I get this this little box, and I can add an additional detail to my collider by dragging it closer. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit better. And again, I'm going to try and be as tight over here as possible, because this is where my plane would collide with the clouds and with the island. So I got to be pretty tight there, so it's more accurate. And I want to try and be as even as I can be, because otherwise what's going to happen is I'm going to have slightly different collisions from one to the other. I don't want that. So it's going to be just as close. I'm doing this visually, and it's great that Unity allows you to do this kind of stuff. Typically in code, it's a lot more difficult to do this kind of shape. So you see that this is a better collider, a shape for my collider, than it would be. A little bit heavier, but I only have one plane. I have multiple clouds. Sometimes it's better to use something else for my clouds. All right, so this is this. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to click away from my plane and click back. I'm also going to fix my island up, because I forgot when I added my rigid 2D, I didn't zero this stuff out. So make sure you zero this stuff out here as well for your rigid 2D on your island. And also, sorry, on my player, I forgot one more thing. You need to click on is trigger. Is trigger. Okay, so is trigger should be on all your colliders for this example. We'll talk about why in a bit. Okay, so I imagine if I don't have this collision map, and if you're using Unity 4.3, by the way, you may not be able to modify your colliders the way I'm doing it. If you notice how I can go in there and edit my collider, Unity 4.3 doesn't give you the same kind of control, right? Or 4.x, let's just call it 4.x, 4.6, whatever it is, that the last version of Unity was. So what about if you don't have these colliders? What's another way to do this without the use of colliders? Is there another way that you can think of with code? What's another way you can do collisions, detect collisions with code? Only with code, no collider. Sorry? I could create boundaries, but that's very challenging. What other things? What other things can you do? Any other ideas? From a 2D perspective, we also can use distance. So example would be if I really want to not use the colliders, I could detect the distance. Like for example, let me take away this for these little circles for a second. I have my my objects here, right? And I could take the distance between half the height of this object and half the height of my plane, and if it's less than those two things added together, the distance is less than both heights. So half the height of my plane, half the height of my my cloud. If it's less than that, I know pretty much I have a collision, because that means detected, right? That's another way to do it. It saves you a little bit of cycles. It's a little bit easier from a calculation perspective instead of using physics 2D. Okay, so it's a little bit easier.
But do we need to take it in terms of the position as well?
You don't really, well, you need to the position, but what I'm saying is I take the distance between my one position and the other position, the middle. So between the middle of the plane and the middle of the cloud, if it's less than half the distance, half the height of these two objects, then pretty much you have a collision. It's very close.
So it should be another update method where it's checking every pixel.
It does check. You check it on every frame, right? But to me, I mean, that might sound like it's hard, but actually it's easier than what we're doing on the computer. If I check distance as opposed to overlapping, if I overlap, it's way more, there's more calculations involved, right? For us, it's okay. We don't have to do this, the distance thing. We can do the collider. It's okay, it's pretty good. Let's take a look. So if I go back to Unity now, I have my colliders, right? I have my collider. I want to be able to, well, first of all, let us do a couple things here. Let's go up to GitHub, and I'll upload for those people who couldn't follow along. I'm going to save my scene. Okay, so I'm going to save my scene, and I'm going to save my project, right? Save all that stuff and make sure that this is saved as well, right? And I'm going to go into GitHub, and I'm going to say git add dot git commit -m. I'll say added colliders for all game objects. There we go. So that's now git push origin master should send everything up to Git for you guys, so you have everything I have on GitHub. Okay, cool. So that's one piece. Now, what we need to do is be able to detect. We have to be able to detect how these colliders work, right? What do I mean by that? Well, okay, so I've got these colliders. I got my plane, and I've got my island, and I got my clouds. I want to detect the collisions that they're happening, right? So how do I do that? Well, I do that if I click on my player. I have this script for my player. Right now, the first script I have is called my player controller script, right? Now, one thing I could do is I could add additional scripts to each of my game objects. Let's add another script to my game object. So I'm going to add another component. It's on my player game object, okay? And it's going to be a new script. And we're going to call this player collider. Okay? And press create and add. Now this puts it, if you look at scripts or look at assets, it puts it kind of in the middle of nowhere. Let's drag and drop this player collider script right into scripts. Now when I click on scripts, you see that I have a bunch of these other scripts here. And I have my player collider script right here. Let me double click on that and bring on mono develop, and so I can see my script. This is my script. Okay, so here, inside here is where I want to add the details for my colliders, right? That's what I want to do. I want to kind of put in how my collider is going to kind of intersect with the other one, right? And of course, we're going to use a very simple script. You're going to see how silly it is, how simple and silly it is to put it into play. Now, we talked about this when we did that kind of an overview of game objects. Remember, I kind of did that PowerPoint presentation with you guys, and I did an overview of all the Unity event lifecycle. One of them was the event lifecycle with physics and so on. So we have this other event that I could add in called, we're going to make it of type void, right? And we're going to say on trigger enter, right? And then it's enter 2D, because it's not just, if I just go on trigger enter, that's only for 3D objects. On trigger enter 2D specifies 2D objects. And now I'm going to specify an input, right? There's a collider 2D. Oops. Collider 2D, this one. And I want the argument, the actual local variable, we're just going to call it other game object. That's what we're going to call it. So that's any other game object that comes into contact with our collider, right? So that's the event right there. So any other game object that collides with our body, right, with our collider, it's going to trigger a collision event. So let's do a couple of things here. We're going to do the first one. We're going to say debug.log, right? And we're going to say it's a hit. So anything that hits us, we'll know. We can test it out. It's a hit. Any kind of game object that hits us, we can detect that it's a hit. Let's check that and see if it works. First, let's see if we have any problems with the console. If we do, it would come up here, so it looks pretty good. If I run this thing, right, and if you notice, I'm going to hit my cloud, you can see that it's a hit, it's a hit, it's a hit. Let's try that again. So I'm going to kind of go back and try it again, right? Okay, so I hit, and I see that it's hitting. So it's working. So I'm getting some feedback that my collider is responding to the other objects in on my scene, right? So once I have that, now the sky's the limit. Once I know I can interact with my collisions, I'm good. Let's take a look. So it's nice to say that I'm colliding with something, right? But it'd be nice if we could detect what that something was. How do we do that? We say this. We say if other game object dot tag, remember we tagged all the game object, is equal to we'll say island, right? Then we want to kind of put out to say debug.log island hit. That's the kind of hit we have. We collided with the island, or we'll say island collision. Oh, that's island collision. Okay, and we'll just copy the same thing here, and we'll go down here, and we'll say if it's a cloud, if the tag is a cloud, we'll call it a cloud collision. Now this is important. Important that we have our tags right. Right? Remember we did tags in Unity? Where are they? If I go back to my scene, click on my player has the player tag right here, right? My island has the island tag right here. And my, if I go to prefabs, cloud, my cloud has the cloud tag. So I can tell if it's a cloud or an island, right? Let's go back to monodevelop. So let's see if this works now. So if it's a cloud, it's going to say cloud collision. If it's an island, it's going to say island collision. It's more specific now than it was before. So let's check this out. I'll press play and stop. Okay, we're right in front of a cloud. Our player object is right there. Let's take a look and see what we have. We have a collision with a cloud collision. So I can detect if we have a cloud collision. Okay, let's step it through. So we're going to go step through. Let's go back to our scene. So here's our game. And I'm going to step it through. Let's just step it through. Right? Take a look. Here's my player. Is it colliding now? Take a look. Is that a collision with my other cloud? Let's see what it says. It is. It's close. I knew it was going to be close, right? It's the way I drew my collider, right? And let's go back. So I'm going to keep stepping it through. We're colliding, right? How about this? Is it going to hit the island? Take a look. So boom, 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 boom. Is it a collision here? How about here? It's all cloud still, right? No island. What about if we go here? All right, let's take a look. Island collision. So we know that the island collision and the cloud collision, I can detect both of them. Voila. If I have that, I can do anything else. I can put sounds now. I can make points. I can do the whole thing because I can differentiate between what am I colliding with. Am I colliding with the island or am I colliding with a cloud? This is the whole game right here. Once I create this script and I can detect what I'm colliding with, right? That's how I can generate a score and the whole thing, right? Okay. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, I'm going to add some sounds for collisions, and we'll kind of shore up some of the stuff we have to do from a collider perspective to make sure it all works.